Hi, everyone. Welcome to SmartHER News. My name is Jenna, and it's just after 10 o'clock Central Time on the evening of Saturday, January 3rd, in what has shaped up to be a historic day, with the United States conducting a limited but significant military operation in Venezuela that has removed the de facto president and his wife from the country to face charges in the United States of America. It's a very simple way of describing what has taken place over the last 20 or so hours. We're not even 24 hours into this story. But that at this very moment, Nicolas Maduro is in New York, where we expect him to be held pending those charges. And there are some very big questions about what's next for Venezuela and also what's next for the United States. And what does this mean for American leadership moving forward in the world? And so many other questions. I wanted to jump on really quick in this unfamiliar location. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm in an unfamiliar space because I'm visiting some family, and this news was unexpected. And I had a very rare opportunity to actually speak to someone in Venezuela tonight. We use an encrypted app, a way that we're able to speak privately with some security, and I'm going to explain why that's significant in a moment. And while I have 15 pages of notes in front of me, because this conversation ranged about 90 minutes, I wanted to quickly provide a short report for you to answer some or provide some perspective on some of your common questions that I've received over the last few hours about this story, about what it actually means for the people in Venezuela and what are they thinking. There are a lot in these notes that need to be double and triple sourced and fact checked, and I think will provide a lot of really important context for this story as we move through it. But there are times as a journalist that you just are able to use a conversation for simple perspective. This is the man on the street interviews that sometimes you see when reporters ask someone a random question. We're just getting someone's opinion. We're getting their perspective on what took place because they may have a unique perspective. And that's what this person has, is a unique perspective at a historic moment, witnessing something from inside a country where it is not commonly permissible to speak to the press of any country, let alone the United States of America. So we were extra cautious with how we spoke. And although we went over a lot, we covered a lot of ground, I'm just going to pull a few of these threads for you tonight to provide some instant perspective. I'm not going to talk about where this person is living. We're not going to speak about whether or not they are male or female. I probably will refer to them as they or them, not to be confusing, but because I want to make sure that they remain anonymous. We're not going to talk ages. We're not going to talk family. But I think you'll still find their perspective extremely valuable. So let's start off with the first maybe big question with all of this. Why? And I actually wanted to start there with the conversation, not the military operation, although we're going to get to that very quickly. I just needed to understand, what is it like to live in Venezuela? We hear the term authoritarian regime, dictatorship, socialism, but I've never lived in Venezuela. I don't know what that's really like to try to live your regular life underneath this regime that's talked about so much. And so this phrase, social control, came up in our conversation. And I want to give you an example of this. So the person that was speaking to me said that if it was discovered that they were speaking out against those that are currently in power, someone could show up, kidnap their parents, take them, hold them for ransom until they showed up, put them in prison and torture them, or even kill them. No one shows up at a warrant at the door. Someone just kicks it in. And that's how the government shuts down any sort of desire to speak out about what's happening inside the country or how people are feeling about the government and the leadership in place. Let me give you another example. This person said, it's not just about social control when it comes to income, although your income is severely limited. For example, you could earn a bonus. You could get a couple extra dollars a month if you agree to show up at a protest that is in favor of those in power. That was one example of social control being used for income. But the other sort of social control is just physically monitoring where you are, what you're doing, and always having that in the back of your head about what this might look like for you or your family. That always being part of every single one of your decisions. That's a sort of social control that this government had and may even continue to have on the people of Venezuela. It's something that's foreign to many of us. but certainly not to those that are living there now. And the extreme poverty that is part of the society is also important to understand. When I asked, well, how many people, or what about the support for the government? I was given loose numbers saying maybe 1 out of 5 people would be in that class that supports the government because they're being protected and they are benefiting from the system. But the vast majority of people do not. But they don't have any way to express that. It's very difficult to express that if you're worried about starving and perhaps you're eating out of a garbage can at the edge of the street, which this person said actually happens, is not something that's made up in the media. And that was important to express to the American people. This is actually what's happening. If you don't behave correctly, by the way, the oil that you may need in your household to cook is just simply not available to you. You have to figure out something else. These are the ways, the levers that this government pulls on regular people to keep everyone in line. So this is what Venezuelans were living under. And we can get into a lot of the different talk about the oil industry, the drug cartels, or any parts of society. But just to understand, this is what the average person is living with and under. And this is what was described to me tonight. I asked this person, well, did you know something was happening? Did you think, we heard of these reports that maybe the United States was planning something. Did you have any thought that that was taking place? And the person said, but there were some indications, there was a lot of reporting about this, but they actually said there was one telling sign that they felt really tipped the hand to show that something was imminent. And you want to know what it was? It has to do with baseball. So there's the Caribbean Series, which is a really important tournament that involves a lot of countries like Venezuela or Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. And this tournament is said to be played over the next several weeks. And right before Christmas, it was announced that this tournament that this time was going to be held in Venezuela was actually going to be moved to Mexico. And the person said, this was a sign because it is so important. Baseball is so important in Venezuela. It's actually more important than soccer, than other Latin American countries. And that this was a real loss for Venezuela to lose the tournament, but a sign that the instability was swirling, that people were feeling that something was going to happen. And in fact, when I looked at reports on this, I found that there were several countries that were pulling out of the tournament because they were worried about the instability inside Venezuela. And that to them was the first thought that something was happening sooner rather than later. When I asked about the night, what was the night like in Venezuela last night? Like, what did it feel like? Did something feel off? And this person said, not necessarily, but that the night was extraordinarily dark and that the climate, which wasn't agreeable, and we actually heard a little bit about this from the administration today in their press conference, the climate that wasn't agreeable suddenly was agreeable for this sort of operation to take place in the early morning hours that it did. So your number one question is, well, how do the people of Venezuela feel about this? I asked you this on social media, and that's your number one concern. What do people feel on the ground? How are they feeling about this action taken by the United States, controversial as it is, even amongst our own political conversation here at home? And what stood out most to me is this person expressed immense gratitude. The person described having hope for just a moment, just that flicker of hope, and feeling that they hadn't felt that way in a really long time. And it was such a unique feeling to suddenly have such gratitude and hope that there could be real change that could come to the country. Two things that stood out about this conversation that were expressed that it did not even cross my mind, perhaps as an American, and that I really want to relate to you because I thought they were so interesting. I asked about, well, how does the Venezuelan people feel about the United States of America coming into their country and then taking someone out of their country? What does that actually feel like? What do people feel about that action? And this person said what was very important to them is that the action taken by the United States was done on a legal basis. There was an indictment. The United States came in and took the people, were the target of these indictments, the allegations that were made against them. The United States did not come in and take 20 people or 5 people or a group from the government, that it was very targeted on exactly the people that the charges were against. And that now those same people would be taken to a court of law in the United States where they would actually receive a fair trial. And although this person obviously expressed some critique of the Maduro regime, they also said it was important that he had his day in court where he was able to face a fair trial, and that this is so unique to America. And so the targeted nature of the operation, the fact that it was focused on the people that were facing this particular indictment, that they would be taken for a fair trial in the United States of America, was an important part of the process. Process also came up in another way, because I asked about the future. Well, if the Venezuelan people feel some gratitude and hope and excitement about perhaps some change, what about the process? What about the vice president of Nicolas Maduro getting on television talking about continuing the government as it is? What concerns do people have? And this person said there has to be an orderly process of transition, and the people that were even attached to Maduro, even with the negative connotations that they have, likely have to be part of that process in order for the change to actually happen. The person said they would not be surprised if starting next week that martial law was declared. There's already a curfew, by the way, in Venezuela right now, that there could be a martial law of some sort established for several months, even as the leadership figures out the next steps with the United States. But that they themselves were not overly concerned with that this wasn't going to happen overnight. And I expressed, well, if I was there, I just would want the change to come in. I want all those people gone. And I want the wildness, I want that kind of wild chaos to take place where there's going to be someone new in power next week and that people are going to be free on the streets to say exactly what they want. And this person says to me, well, that's because you're American and you know what it's like to be free. But for us, this process is going to be important as we figure out our next steps. By the way, you might find this exchange interesting. I felt my American perspective in this question as well. When I said to this person, well, how do you feel about the images of the video coming out of Nicolas Maduro in the custody of US law enforcement? How does that make you feel? And there was a brief pause, and the person says, well, he's going to be taken care of a lot better than the people he put into prison in Venezuela. He got a private charter flight to the United States of America. Nothing physically bad is going to happen to him. He's not going to suffer. He's going to get great treatment in the American prison system, something that wasn't provided to others under his leadership. And there was one more pause, and what followed was important. This person talked about a reckoning needing to happen, justice needing to happen for the last several decades of what's transpired and the pain caused to the Venezuelan people, but also an openness to reconciliation at some point where there could be even forgiveness, maybe not right now, but some point in the future. And I think this speaks to the complex nature of the dynamics at play. You have the Venezuelan people that are very proud of their culture and the potential for their country yet again, but there's all sorts of emotions. So as I leave you with this final thought, it's just a reminder, this is one perspective. There's millions and millions of people in Venezuela, and they all have their own story and their own thoughts about what took place. So we want to value what we heard tonight and also know that there's going to be a difference of opinion as well. We have to remain open to that too as we report out this story. But I loved this final sentiment that I was left with, which is that we could all be witnessing a new republic in the making, and that many things will change in the future, this person said, but that change had also happened just in today. And I loved holding those two thoughts together, knowing that there's a lot of ways that this story is going to develop. And also, change happened on January 3rd, 2026. So I'll leave you with that tonight. Thank you for your support of quick, concise, nonpartisan, smarter news. I'm feeling very grateful tonight for our community and for our ability to report the news in a random room in East Texas on the road during a holiday and not feel the fear of someone breaking down our door just for trying to highlight the story that is developing in front of us. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your belief in Smarter News, and I'll see you with more this week on social media, on podcast, and on smarternews.com. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.